Welcome back to another LP Gallery tutorial. And in this video, we are going to be creating and also animating birthday candles. So what we're going to be doing is creating a nice flickering flame, and then we're going to have wax drip down the candle, and then we'll have the wax kind of pile up at the base. So let's get the candles lit. So we have a nice flickering flame, kind of realistic. Now we got the wax just flowing, dripping down the candle. And in a second, it's going to just pile up at the base, just like that. So that is our goal today, and it's all quite easy. So let's get started. So the first thing you're going to notice is that we're using a darker background. And the reason for this is because we're going to be lighting our candles, and the flames are going to be very light colored. If you do this on a light colored background like white, you're not going to really notice the flames. That's part of what makes this candle animation really stand out. So you really require a darker background. Now, I just happen to be using a darker gray, but you could use any darker color you like. Okay, so let's create our candle. So we're going to grab the text tool. We're going to click here. We're going to type 50 years. You could, of course, type whatever you like. And we're going to go to Format, Text Effect, and I'm going to change it to Word Art. We'll just use the top one here, the default. You need to have a Word Art so you have the flexibility of stretching this. And then we're going to change the font. We're going to go to Home. Now I'm going to just use a font called Poplar. I like this one a lot. And to me, it looks like birthday candles. Okay, let's take that. Let's stretch this out. Let's give it a nice color. Let's go to our text options, and I think I'll use this nice burgundy color. It looks pretty good. Because when we finish this project, we're going to animate it with flames. We shouldn't have such straight tops here, because if the candle had flames, it's going to be melting the tops down. So we should be kind of putting little indentations in the top here. So let's do that. I'm going to use a cloud shape. I'm going to just kind of drag this out like this, and just make a bunch of these. Kind of like that. And I'm going to select them all. I'm going to do a union on them. And then I'm going to click on my text. Click on my cloud shape. And then we'll do a subtract. And we get something like that. So now that looks more like melting candles. I'm going to put a nice 3D effect on that. You have to remember that having cut this is not text anymore. This is a shape. So now we have to deal with the shape options, not the text options. Okay, so let's go to shape options right here. Let's go to effects. We're going to use the round bevel. We don't need to select it. That's the default. We just need to type. So we're going to click here. I'll just make it 12 points for both. It looks pretty good. I think for material, I'm going to go to plastic. And I think for lighting, I'll leave it at 3 point. It looks pretty good. But I am going to do the angle. I'm going to change the angle to maybe about 130%. Now these are just options. You kind of just play with it till you get to what you want. Okay, so you can see the tops look pretty good now. They kind of look like they're a bit melted. That's perfect for what we want. Now the next thing to do is to create our drips. If you watched our video on Text into Text Part 2, we gave you a little example of how to do that. So if you missed that, it's pretty straightforward. We're not going to use shapes and cut them into drips. That's too complex, too time consuming. We're going to use just text. Now we need to only use certain characters, things that have longer stems, things like the letter T, the letter I. They have longer stems and they will make good looking drips. Now we need to use character fonts, and that means fonts that don't have straight stems. So things like Comic Sans works well, Bradley Hand works well. So it's just a matter of going through your font list and finding more character fonts where the longer stems aren't so straight, but might be slightly crooked. Maybe they start thick to thin, something along that line. Okay, so let me grab the text tool. Let me just click up here. And again, we're just looking for characters with longer stems. That would be like the letter T, the letter I, and maybe I'll add another T, and sometimes even the letter J and Y work well. But that depends on the font. So you have to try it and see which font works best. So I'll add a couple more T's, Y, another J, maybe another T, and I think that looks pretty good. That's really all you need, something like this. Okay, I'm going to make a duplicate of that, just in case I have to go back to it. The next thing is, of course, we have to convert this to word art. So we're going to go to Format, Text Effects, Transform, use the default. Now we need it in a word art format so that we can stretch it. Now you can see this font, not too good. Stems are too straight, doesn't look natural. So we have to find a font that's a little more casual, a little more artistic. So let's go to our Home tab. I happen to have some already pulled out. So you can see I've got a bunch here. These are all casual. You can even use scripts, like brush script works really well too. So I'm going to use this one here. No other name. I like that. I use it quite often for things like this. So I'm going to click on that. So if we look at the letter T in this font, you can see it almost looks like a drip. Kind of starts out a little thick, goes thin, ends up thick again. So that's the kind of font you're looking for. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually bring them a little closer together. So I'm going to go to my character spacing here, and I'm going to try going very tight. And you can see that works a little better. I can still bring them a little more closer together, but I think that looks pretty good. Now the next thing is I want to trim this top down. Don't need all that big, thick, bulky part there. I do want a bit of bulk right here in the top, but not that much. So I'm going to grab my rectangle, and I'm going to cut it down to about that size. Okay, so I do want some thickness on the top up here, but not that much. So something like that, and I definitely don't need all this. So I'm going to take this, and I'm going to trim this down a bit. I'm going to leave a little bit of bulk there. That's okay. So I'm going to click here, 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 and subtract. That looks pretty good. Now I'm going to give it a color. Let's see. I'm just going to give it like a burgundy to red. So I'm going to go to gradient, and we get our default. Get rid of those two stops. Click here, burgundy, maybe a red there. So it's just slightly dark at the top, lighter to the bottom. Okay, now this is important. We are going to be copying and pasting into here, and we want to tile it so it tiles across horizontally. But we don't want more than one row. Okay, this represents the top. This represents the bottom. Right now, if I copy and paste it, I'm going to get 2 rows that are going to be repeated, and that's not what I want. In order to prevent 2 rows and stick to one, this has to be stretched the same height as this, actually a little bit taller. So I'm going to take this, stretch it just a little bit taller, and then when I copy and paste it, it cannot repeat into 2 rows. Now obviously I don't want to paste this to this one here. This is our background shape. We need to create a top shape. So I'm going to duplicate that, and that will be copied and pasted into here. So I'm going to click here, copy it, click here. Remember, it's a shape. You've got to go to shape options, picture, texture. You get the default, go to clipboard, tile it, and we get something like that. So let's put it on top. And if you look at that, you're going to say, well, that kind of looks like drips, but they look pretty flat. Now, the reason they look flat, of course, is that both of these have a 3D effect applied to them, and the 3D effect will make that look flat. So we have to remove the 3D effect from here. So just go to our effects, remove the top bevel, and we get something like that. Now that looks pretty good, but it's kind of flat now. We still got to give it a bit of a 3D effect. So what we do is we go to our shadows. We're going to go to our shadow, not it, drop shadow, and inner shadow. We click there. Now we get something like that. Again, it looks a little bit 3D, but it's too dark. So the default color is black. We're going to change that to white. And we get something like that. Now we have some parameters to play with. For example, we can change the angle. So if we're not happy with the angle, we can spin this and change where the light source is coming from. So we can just keep playing. And I think I kind of like that. That looks pretty good. Now what I think I'm going to do is kind of soften it a bit. And that's with the blur. So I'm going to spin this up a bit, just a little bit. And that kind of just softens the drips. So they're not so harsh. They're a little more blended into the background there. I kind of like that, but the drips are kind of close together. That's because of this. So what I'm going to do is take this and just kind of stretch it out. I'd like the drips to be a little thicker and not so close together. So I'm going to stretch that out, copy it again, put it into here, and paste it back and tile it. And we get something like that. So now the drips look a little more thicker. I think I kind of like that better. Now we still have more options. We can actually move the drips. So if I go back here, I can play with my X offsets. That's left to right. and I can move it. If I'm not happy with the way it's settled there, I can just move it till I get to the part that I like. And I think I kind of like that. Now the reason this works so well is because when you copy and paste this into here, it's going to where those letter shapes are. It's not going between the letter shapes here, like here. It's sticking to within the letter shapes themselves, and that's why this effect works so well. If you were to paste into the box background, then you would get it going between the letters. Okay, next thing we should do is make sure we line these up. Let's go to line, center, and align, middle. Good. So they're lined up perfectly. So the next thing to do is to create our wicks. We're going to actually use this shape again. So I'm going to duplicate it, and then we're going to cut it. So I'm going to, let's see, right here. So I only want a small part about right there. So I'm going to take that top part off. I'll duplicate this, and I'll stretch this down, something like that. Okay, I'm going to click on that, grab my rectangles, merge, and subtract. Okay, now we only need one of these. So once again, grab the rectangle. We're going to get rid of the rest. Okay, so now we have one. Looks pretty good. Now what I would like is for this to be a little darker because it's supposed to look like it's burning. Okay, so I'm going to take this darker burgundy and I'm going to drag it back. I'm going to click about here and I'm going to make that black. But I do want it to look like it's lit on top. So I'm going to click right at the edge here and I'm going to make it yellow and just bring this a little closer. So it's got a little bit of a bright spot. So it kind of looks like it's lit. That looks pretty good. Maybe we'll just bring this up a bit. Okay, now to me that's a little too smooth. I'd like to rough this wick up, make it look like a real wick. A real wick is kind of twisted. So this is a bit too smooth. So let me copy that. I'm going to paste it as a picture. And I can use my picture tools on that. So I'm going to go to my format and I'm going to go to artistic. What I want is a film grain. Film grain adds a little texture to it. So I'm going to click on film grain and I'm going to go back here and I'm going to adjust it. Maybe I'll take it up here to about 50 or 60 and we get just a bit of a texture you see there. So compared to that, you can see this looks a little more realistic. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my picture tools. I'm going to go to color, might brighten it up a bit. And then I'm going to go here to corrections. And I've got the middle spot here. That's what default is. And what I want to do is just dull that up a bit. So I'm going to move it up here. So it's just not quite so bright. So a little dull like that. So now if we compare that to that, you can see that this has a little bit of a texture. So it kind of looks a little more realistic. Okay, let's get rid of this one. And let's just duplicate these. Of course, it could be all different lengths. You don't have to have them all exactly the same height. So it gives a little variation when you do that. Now, before we actually start creating that little pile of wax right here at the base, I'm going to click on the background shape and I'm going to copy it and put a reflection on it. I want a reflection that reflects downward, and that gives us a bit of a base. It gives us an idea that it's sitting on something. That will help with the illusion of creating this pile of wax here. So I'm going to click here, and I can see by the red color that I've got the background shape. So I'm going to copy it and paste it. And I'm going to go back to my effects. I want a reflection. I'll just take maybe a middle one. And I'll take the transparency up. I don't want it too dark. Something like this. Now you might say, why didn't I just do that to the background? Well, I don't like the space here. There's a little sliver of space between the text and reflection. I don't want that at all. I want to be able to take the reflection and hide it underneath. So I don't want that space. So I create a duplicate and then I copy it, paste it as a picture. Don't need this. Get rid of it. And now I just got to cut the top part off. And we get something like that. So now I can control it better. I can put it where I want. Now, because technically this should have a 3D effect like the background does, we don't have a 3D effect because the reflections don't do that. What I'm going to do is give it a blur. Now, because it's a picture, I can do that. So I'm going to go here, go to blur, maybe give it about a 5 pixel blur. And hopefully people won't know that even though it's a reflection of the background text, there's no 3D effect because it's slightly blurry. You may not notice it as well. Okay, and I'm going to send that to the back and just put it down like that. And we don't need all this empty space. I'm going to right click, I'm going to crop, and just bring that up to there. And we have something like that. That part is done. So now that we have a baseline here, it'll be a lot easier to see when we create this pile of wax where it's actually sitting. So it's very simple to do that. We take this top part here, all the drips, we duplicate it, we go to Format, and we rotate vertically. And all you got to do is just line it up and squish it down. Something like that. And then just bring it up wherever you want. You can stretch it up if you like. And we get something like that. And there's your drips. Now you'll notice that they're not quite meeting here. There's an edge. And that's because we started from a dark to a light. And so we kind of see that there. So what we're going to do is go back to our shadow and probably just take the transparency up a bit. That should lighten it a bit. Not too much. And that looks pretty good. So it looks almost seamless. So I'm pretty happy with that. So now we have to create a reflection for this one. So once again, we're going to copy, paste, put a reflection on that one. Maybe I'll do a longer reflection, and maybe I'll take the transparency up a bit. And of course, we don't want that one, so we're going to copy and paste as a picture. That one we don't need to get rid of. Take this, grab a rectangle, and cut the top part off. And we get something like that. And that looks pretty good. Now we're going to take both of these reflections, so the background and this one. And we're going to send them to the back. Good. Now we just take this, put it in the background, and now you have a nice little base. And that looks pretty good. Now, because these are pictures, you still have the ability to use your picture tools. So I can go to Format. I can make them a little more colorful if I want. I can make them a little lighter, a little darker. So I still have all that to play with. I think I kind of like, let's see, something a little more dull like that. I think I like that. Okay, it looks pretty good. And of course I could do the same with the background, but I think I'll just leave it. Most of the building part is now done. What's left to do is the animation and of course create the flame. Now I'm going to leave the flame to the end as the last part. So what we're going to do is animate the wax dripping down, and then we're going to create the flame and animate the flame. So we can do the flame all in one shot. Okay, so let's go to the animation tab. We want the animation pane. Let's bring that up. Now, the dripping wax is just one simple wipe animation. So we're going to click on it. We're going to add the animation. And we want an intro, so we want to wipe. Now we're going to look at the options. We want to wipe from the top. And we're going to say OK. And we're going to just run that, check it out. And that works good, just too fast. So let's go here, let's go to timing. And let's try a 10-second one. Nice and slow drip. Let's say 10 seconds. We're going to say OK. Let's go back and let's run it. Now that looks pretty good. And of course you can make it as slow as you want. Now let's go back. Now this is going to be important. Right now I have it set for on click only because I want to control it. But once we get the flame on, it'll be with previous. So right now on click, so I control it. Now what I want also is a delay, because when those candles light, I want to be like a 3-4 second pause before the wax starts melting. So I'm going to click here, maybe put a 3-second delay, say OK. Now we'll start it. I'm going to give it a click. That's going to happen for 3 seconds, and then it's going to start dripping. And that looks pretty good. Now for this mass of wax at the base, I need to select its reflection too. So I'm going to click on the reflection and the wax there, and I'm going to group those. And now we're going to apply an animation there. Now the problem with this animation at the bottom is how to time it right. If we just use a wipe and we wipe upwards, the reflections will happen first before the wax. If we wipe downwards, we'll get the wax first before the reflections. And as the wax builds up, the reflection should happen at the same time. So we need a different animation. So we're going to use one called a split. And what the split's going to do is go in two different directions. It's going to split up and it's going to split down. So as the wax starts building up, the reflections will start building down like it naturally should. So let's go get it. We're going to add an animation. The split's right here. The default is a vertical split. We need a horizontal split. So we're going to go here, effect options. We're going to look at our effects here, directions. We want a horizontal out. Like that. We're going to go to timing. And of course, we want to start with previous. Now, I want a long delay, obviously, because we have to time the wax as it goes down. But I also want the animation to happen at a really slow pace so that it really looks like it's building. So I'm going to give it a delay of about 11 seconds. And for the actual duration of the animation, I'm going to give it 10 seconds. So it's a slow buildup. So what should happen is the wax should slowly start building upwards because it's dripping down, building up, and the reflection should start working downwards. Okay, so let's take a look and see how that works. Okay, now we got the 3-second delay. The wax is going to start coming down. As it starts coming down here, when it gets to the bottom, you should see it start to build up. So it starts building up as it should. Reflections are working down as they should. And it builds up and it continues to build up a bit like it's still dripping. I think that works out perfect for what we need. Let's do it one more time. So again, we're going to get the slow drips coming down. As it starts coming down, you're going to see it start slowly building up again. Again, the wax will build up here. The reflections will build down as they should. And that's perfect. And you can see that it's still building up. So it looks like it's still pouring down. It's perfect. Okay, so the animation of the candle is actually done. The next one, of course, is the flame. Now, the flame is what sells everything. So we're going to make it look realistic, and we're going to do our best to make it animate like a real flame. Okay, so it's time to create our flame. So let's go grab a shape. We're going to use the wave shape. Draw a nice wave. We're going to make it a double pointed one. And we're going to make it a little bit smaller. We're going to rotate it, and we only actually need the top point. We don't need the bottom point. So I'm going to grab a rectangle, and we'll just slice off the bottom there. Now what I need down here is an actual opening, because a flame is actually transparent towards the bottom, and it goes from a transparent to almost a blue and then into the yellows and oranges. So we want that transparency in there. So I'm going to grab an oval. And I'm going to just draw a nice little oval. Now what I'd like is for one side to be slightly larger or longer. So like one side is a little longer than the other side, like this. So one longer, one shorter. Kind of like that. Okay, so we get something like that. That's what we're looking for. Now the reason we want one side to be larger, because one of the animations we're going to be applying is a swivel. And if the bottoms are different sizes, you're going to get a better wobble in the flame. If they're exact same size, you're going to probably notice the swivel a little too much. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now we got to add some color. Let's go to gradient. Now 4 stops is perfect. We're going to click here. We're going to add this light little gold color. I'm going to move this one up here. I'm going to add a brighter gold color there. I'm going to move this one up here. I'm going to add this dark orange. And in this one here, I'm going to leave it blue, but make it a darker blue. And this one's important because we're going to make that one transparent. Get rid of the outline. And we can just bring these up a little closer. Okay, now we don't want a linear. We want a radial blend. So I'm going to go here, go radial. And what I want is the yellow to be at the top. Something like that. So we have yellow to orange to blue to transparent. So like this. And that's what you're looking for. So you want that transparency, which is important. So that looks pretty good. Next step is we got to convert this into a picture. We don't want these sharp edges. You'll never make the flame realistic if it has a sharp edge. It should have a soft edge. Okay, so we're going to copy that, paste it as a picture. I'm going to go to our effects here, artistic effects. The first one I'm going to put in there is a glow diffused. That adds a little bit of white to it and kind of breaks it up a bit, adds a little grain to it. So I'm going to take that down a bit so it's not so strong. And that's going to be important for the next one. We're going to copy that and we're going to paste it again. And here we're going to add a blur, about a 6 pixel blur. Now, if you don't have the glow diffuse, this is going to blur too much. So the glow diffuse adds a little bit of pixelation in here, which is important. Okay, now if we put this here and we put this here, you can see the difference. This flame already looks like it's in motion. Okay, the next thing I want to do is kind of dull this. I don't want the flame to be so bright. So I'm going to go to my format, corrections, and I'm probably going to choose something like this one up here. So I'm going to dull the flame a little bit more. It will actually look more lifelike if the flame is a little more on the dull side than the bright side. The animations won't be so obvious then. Now before we start the flame animation, we want to make sure that the wax animation has the same start. So they should both be start with previous. So you just want to check that, start with previous. Now it's important that these two animations be at the bottom of the list. Right now they're at the top. So as we start creating the flame animation will start going down at the bottom of the list. So it's important that these go to the bottom. So as you build the flame animation, you can drag them beneath the flame animation, or just do all the flame animation and then drag these two to the bottom. But they need to be at the bottom of the list. So the flame animation will consist of 3 animations. An entrance wipe, that's going to do just that, wipe. It's not going to repeat. An exit wipe, that is going to repeat. And a swivel that's going to repeat. So let's do that. So we're going to go add animation. We want just a wipe. There it is. And you can see it's the bottom. I'm going to drag it up. Now this one is the on click animation. And just for this one, we'll keep it to click animation so that we can control the rest of them. Once we get them all set, then we'll change that one to with previous. Okay, so let's check out the timing. So you see on click, it says 5 seconds. I think that's good. And no repeat. It's important that this first one does not have a repeat. Okay, let's check that. It's a click, so we got a click. And that's all it does. Perfect. Okay, let's add the next one. Now we're looking for an exit. So we want an exit wipe. There it is. We got to drag it up. Let's look at its options. Okay, now this one has to go with previous. And this one has to be fast. So it's going to be a 0.2. Now it's important that this repeat. So we click here and say until end of slide. And then we look at the effect. Now the default is the bottom. So the first one, the entrance came from the bottom up, which is perfect. That's not what we want. We want it reversed. We want it top down. And that's going to give you the nice bounce in the flame. Not the bottom up. It's top down. And we're going to say okay. So let's take a look at that. And you get that. It's exactly what you want. Now the next one is going to be the swivel. So we have a swivel. And we're going to take the entrance swivel. There it is. We're going to just move it up. And we're going to take a look at its options. Let's go to timing. And of course this has to be with previous. And the timing on this one will be about a 0.3. And of course, this has to repeat. Now let's take a look. We're going to say OK. And let's run that. And there you have your bouncing flame. So again, 3 animations. Looks pretty good. So obviously all we have to do now, of course, is to duplicate the flame. Now we want some variation. So we'll make some of the flames maybe a little smaller. We'll maybe move them close to the wick, some above the wick. And maybe we'll take the exit wipe and delay some of them. So again, we have a little variation and everything is not moving in such a uniform manner. Okay, so let's duplicate that. And maybe what I'll do is make it a little bit smaller. And I'm going to flip it, rotate. Make it a little skinnier, and maybe I'll just drop this one down like this. Okay, so you can see it's down here. And of course, because we duplicated the first one, it had a click to start, so we have to change that. And we're going to say start with previous, and we'll take these two and we'll just drag them to the bottom. So the wax again is at the bottom. Okay, so let's check this out. And we get something like that. Again, so we have a little variation in the flame. So this one's a little smaller. It's a little closer to the wick. This one's above the wick. So again, it's not quite the same. So it looks a little different. Okay, so let's take this one. Let's duplicate that one there. And of course, we want to flip it so they're not facing the same way. And maybe on that one, maybe I'll make it a little skinnier. Put a little taller up here. And let's see, I'm going to take the wax animation to the bottom at the end. So let's go to this one here. That's the exit wipe. And let's just put a little bit of a delay, maybe a 0.5 second. And let's run that one. And you can see it, just a slight variation. It just breaks up that uniform movement of the flame. So that's what we're doing. So again, we're going to have some little taller, a little smaller, closer to the wick, away from the wick, and then change some of the exit wipe delay. Okay, so that's all we have to do. So I'm going to just continue and we'll speed this up. After you duplicate them, and if you want to change the timing, you'll have to notice that you have all three selected. So if you just were to click one of these and change the timing, you would change the timing for all of these. So it's important, you're only changing the timing of the exit wipe. So you have to click on the exit wipe. And that means you have to click right here, right on the little star there, and you get it. So it's important you do that. You click on the specific one that you want. And if you click on the edge here where the star is, then you get it. And that's it. So there's your dancing flame. So we have some a little smaller, we have some of the exit wipe delayed, and we have some closer to the wick, some above the wick. So we got a nice variation, so it doesn't look so uniform. It doesn't look like you did just a copy and paste. So you'll probably notice that as the wax is dripping down, and if you looked at the base wax over here, that there was too much of a delay. So when we did this before, it was perfectly run. But now that we've added all this animation, there's a lot more calculations to be done. So now this was delayed a little more. So I'm going to show you that again. Okay, so we got the flame. Here comes the dripping wax. And you'll see by the time it gets down here that this one's too slow. See? Now we got the buildup, which is way too slow. Okay, so what's happening is with all this animation, the timing is off here. So we have to change the timing. And that's just something you have to do when you have a lot of animation. So it doesn't always work the way you started it. So you got to look at everything and then adjust the timing. So let's do that. So this one here, so we're going to take these two and we want to drag them to the bottom. So they go right to the bottom. And I'm going to click on that. That's this one. Let's go to timing. And I'm going to probably knock maybe 2 seconds off. I'll try 8 seconds. And we'll run that again. And as it gets down, it should start, there it is, start building up. And that looks pretty good. Okay, so just keep that in mind that when you start adding animation, some of your timing of the previous things you did might be a little off. Okay, well, I think that works out pretty good. So I'm pretty happy with that. It was a lot of fun to do. I think you'll have a lot of fun doing it. So there it is, creating birthday candles and animating birthday candles. Now keep in mind that you're watching the flame in the YouTube video and you're kind of stuck at a certain frame rate. So you don't get the smoothness of the flame as you will in the actual PowerPoint animation. So this will actually be more lifelike and more smoother in the actual animation. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. And if you like this video, give us a like. If you'd like to subscribe, we always got more things like this to do. So, thank you for watching, and we hope to catch you on the next video.